Mayor Gregg Hull. It is good to meet you. Thank you for having me in your beautiful house, by the way.
Absolutely. No, it's my pleasure to be here, and I appreciate you coming and doing this at home. It makes it a little easier for me to get these meetings done.
Well, you are incredibly busy, and I just want to start by saying congratulations on everything you've accomplished in the last, rounding out about 12 years now in Rio Rancho. So congratulations. I put a video up. We were just talking about the last mayor election. I put a video up on my Instagram, and at the end of it, I jokingly said, all right, I'm moving to Rio Rancho.
Yeah.
And I had a couple comments on it, but I got like 10 or 15 direct text messages from my friends that live in Rio Rancho. Like, dude, I will help you move. We'll find you a place to rent. Like, Albuquerque sucks. Get out of there.
Right.
So whatever you're doing, you're doing it right, and you're capturing the young audience. Well, young-ish. I'm almost in my 30s.
Well,
so you're doing it right. You're making it easy up here.
Yeah. Well, we want to make this. Rio Rancho was originally the concept around it was kind of more of around a retirement base, but we saw a really big influx of young couples moving into the community. Myself being one of them. Back when we first moved to we moved to New Mexico, but Carrie had already lived here in Rio Rancho, and I lived in Albuquerque at the time, and Rio Rancho was kind of a booming community. And when we got together, we decided this is where we were going to raise the kids. And so we were a very young family starting off here in Rio Rancho. And here we are all these years later. And, we've seen this city grow from, I think when we first moved here, it might have been around 30,000, 40,000 people. And now we're punching up around 120.
So I was going to say, are you guys the second most populated city yet?
There's some debate. We're really not going to know that until the next census, which is coming up in 2030.
Okay.
And there are numbers out there. Sometimes you'll see our numbers are a little bit higher based on census estimates, and then sometimes Las Cruces is a little bit higher. So, it depends on the numbers that you're looking at. I know our Chamber of Commerce president, he's like, no, we're number 2 now. So he's enthusiastic. I said, but Jerry, I have to wait for the data.
Well, the growth is incredible. And I mean, because I'm born and raised in Albuquerque. I grew up in 2 different sides of Albuquerque. I grew up on the west side right off a golf course, and then in the South Valley in Albuquerque, and then a little bit of the east side as well after my mom moved from the west side. But my point is I've spent the vast majority of my time in Albuquerque.
Yep.
Coming to Rio Rancho, it feels like a different world, and I'm not trying to disparage Albuquerque, but Albuquerque has genuine problems that are not getting better. And so when you not as a better than worse than thing necessarily, but when you look at where Rio Rancho was about 12 years ago, and you see the growth trajectory that you've been on. And obviously there are challenges to Albuquerque that Rio Rancho doesn't have, but there's disadvantages of Rio Rancho that Albuquerque is, and vice versa. When you look at the trajectory, are there specific areas that you and your team, and your office, your administration, you've had to tackle? Like, okay, this is obviously the first one. This is obviously the second one. Was it business development? Was it crime? What did you have to take care of first to make sure that Rio Rancho can get on a trajectory and maintain?
One of the first things we really addressed right off the bat was infrastructure, and we were not making strong investments in infrastructure, starting to get the roads fixed. A few years prior to my taking office, the voters had voted down the road bond, and so there was no funding that was going to roads, so infrastructure was in really bad decay. We had a lot of issues around stagnated growth when it came to businesses coming to Rio Rancho. We can talk about that here in a minute. But the other thing was, with that stagnation, the city really wasn't keeping up on a public safety side with the personnel that we needed to make sure that we were running an effective, public safety system in the city, police and fire, EMS. And so looking at those investments, we kind of strategically went after, investing in infrastructure, because one thing that businesses will see, or investors will see, if you're investing in yourself, then they want to be a partner in that, right? So we started getting the road bond. I think 2016 was when we got the road bond started again. We had to go back out. We really had to earn the public's trust to get that started again.
Improvised Intelligence is sponsored by the amazing people over at Chopped Chili. If you've been a long time listener to the podcast, you know that this is my favorite brand of chili here in New Mexico. Pretty much put it on every meal that I can. They've got red chili, green chili. My personal favorite is this blend of the red and the green. I think this stuff is phenomenal. They also have frozen bags of green chili that you can order directly from their website at choppedchilico.com. You can also find them in stores around the state of New Mexico at Sprouts, Albertsons, Farmers Country Market, John Brooks, Keller's Farm Store, Lowe's Market. You can also find them in Albuquerque, Santa Fe, Hobbs, Gallup, Tucumcari, and for all my friends in Texas, they are in El Paso. Again, choppedchilico.com. Go get yourself some amazing chili. Now back to the podcast.
Well, I was going to ask, do you think they didn't vote for the road bond because they're like, well, we're paying our taxes, nothing's getting fixed anyway? Yeah, no. Is that why?
That's what happened.
Okay.
That's what happened. There was the perception that the city was not doing what they should have done with that money, and so the voters came out and said, well, if we're not seeing roads getting fixed, but we're paying into this system, we're going to go ahead and not pay into the system.
Right. And can you blame them at that point?
No, you could not. And look, I was here when all that happened, so I saw the discussions that were happening. Like, okay, how come these roads aren't getting fixed? How come this isn't happening? How come that's not happening? You know, we're giving you the money, but we don't see the product and the results. So there was a lot of different discussions around that time frame, and of course, at that point in 2013, when I started looking at what I wanted to do next, I had people that were saying, hey, have you ever thought about running for office? You know, that kind of a thing. But once we got into office, I think the very first thing we embarked upon was getting a strategic plan in place. I'm big on planning. I'm big on data-driven decisions. I'm big on understanding what it is that people want. So we did a strategic plan that involved the entire community pulling that together. And plus, we did what was known as a citizen survey. We used a national company to come in, and they, really outlined a very in-depth citizen survey of what people felt about just about every aspect of the community, whether it was the sidewalks, the streets, the public safety, you name it. If it was in the purview of the city's job to do that, we asked questions about it. How do you feel about local government? How do you feel about this? How do you feel about that? And we use that as our benchmark to say, okay, we know what the citizens are feeling. We know what they're most interested in. And now we're going to turn our focus and our decision-making toward those items so that people can see actual markable progress. And when you're seeing markable progress in these areas that the citizens are most concerned about and they're most worried about, you really start to see that community sentiment start to rise. And I think that's what you really feel, the difference in when you get into Albuquerque and Rio Rancho. People say, well, it feels different. I just think we've got a lot of community pride up here. A lot of people really love the community. They're very vested in taking care of it.
That's the key part. Is it's cleaner up here. People are still very nice, but there's an air of, hey, it's nice up here. Don't fuck this up. It's really nice up here. So I'm curious about that survey, the community survey you put out. So at the time, what was the population of Rio Rancho?
So it was about 89,000.
So of that 89,000, so before I ask that, were you doing it by mail, online, cell phone? How were you getting, let's say, the survey out?
So the first survey was really mostly done by mail. There was an online portal where you could go and take the survey, but that was an unscientific portion of that because anybody could log in and just take the survey.
Right.
The mail-in portion was controlled by a NCS, which is the National Community Surveys, national polling firm that comes in and they do just ask a ton of questions, right? And trust in government at that time when that survey came out was at a super all-time low. And so we saw that. People feeling safe in the community, that was low. There was people feeling that the taxes that they were paying, the value for the dollars that they were spending, they didn't feel that those were adequate. They weren't getting the value that they were seeing in the dollars that were being spent. So you take all those things and you say, okay, well, how do we improve upon these particular segments? And I think one thing that I'm very proud of is individuals in the last citizen survey we just took last year, or this summer. Yeah, last year. 97% of people surveyed feel safe in the community during the day. That's a huge number.
So it's very good. So the same question I'm going to ask that I was going to ask for the first survey, I'm going to ask for this one too. Of the, let's say 100% of people that could have taken the survey, how many people did take it?
So we sent out, each year it varies a little bit. The number that gets sent out is somewhere between 1,600 and 2,000 physical envelopes that go out, and the post office randomly selects those. So we don't know where they're going to go. And NCS takes care of that. So the city does not play a role in selecting any of the addresses.
That's good.
In the last one, we did open, once again, we opened up the portal that you can do online. That's non-scientific, because if you live in Phoenix and you found it, you could take the survey. And we don't want to know what you think if you're living in Phoenix, right? We want to know what people in Rio Rancho. What was amazing was though the online numbers were coming in very close to the statistical numbers. And so we were getting a very valid sample there. And I think the returns on those were anywhere between 300 up to 600, getting people to sit down and actually go through all the material. I mean, we're talking, 5, 6, 7, 8 pages of questions. So
it was pretty thorough for what it was.
Yeah. Do you like the way the stoplights are timed? I mean, we got into some questions, right? How do you feel about the EMS service? Do you think our firefighters are nice? Do you think the police are doing a good job? What do you think about all of these different things, all these different aspects? Local government, do you feel that we have enough services in the community for, like activities to do, quality of life amenities, right? How do you feel the roads are? How do you feel the sidewalks are?
How do they reply to the things to do in the community? Because that's a stigma, not just in Albuquerque or Rio Rancho, but just the state in general. There's nothing to do outside of like going outdoors and, things that are good for your health, but going out and hiking and all that, but just attractions, right? How was the response to that started and then changed?
So the response to that was, which was very interesting. In the early surveys, it was a moderate number. I can't remember the exact number, but I'm going to say it was in the 60s. People were satisfied, and so there was a lot of room to improve there. And so we started looking at ways that we could add community amenities. The problem is that we were really dealing with adding amenities on a very strained budget. And we didn't have a road bond, we didn't have a public safety bond, we didn't have a quality of life bond. So anything we did, we either had to do it out of, any cash that we might have had on hand, or partnered with state and federal governments to get grants in, to help us build these things. And so looking at that, what was interesting was after the pandemic, and I think that after the pandemic, we had gotten the number up there pretty good. And there was kind of a national dip for NCS, because we're not the only community that they do surveys for, right? And they were tracking this kind of on a national basis. There was a dip in services, but what was interesting is that year that we did that, and they said, well, we don't feel like there's enough for us to do in the city. That was the year that the city had more services than ever before, because we had opened a new senior center, we had opened a new library, we opened a new campus park, we were holding concerts in the park we had the New Mexico Philharmonic in this for the first time ever. So there was a lot more going on, but it was just that perception. And once again, and there was kind of a national perception that people had been really kind of put in their homes. They hadn't been out. They stopped being able to go to concerts. So I think there was a little bit of that caused it to dip a little bit, but then it came right back up the next survey. So, looking at the way that we kind of rebounded, I think it was just those type of scenarios. You always have to look at the questions, the people, how they're answering those questions, and then really kind of look at overall sentiments, statewide, citywide, nationwide, because a lot of that can play an impact on people's thought processes.
I completely agree. And one thing that you guys added up in Rio Rancho that I'm a huge fan of is the block.
Yes.
I love that. Me and my buddy, AJ, we're both stand-up comics, and we did for about he really ran the brunt of it. But we had a show every Tuesday at the top of the block, the bar that they have up there. We're not doing it anymore. Unfortunately, we'd like to do it again, but get with it.
Yeah.
But it's a great place. And Because that's something that's lifted right out of like Tempe, Arizona.
Right.
Like you don't really see a whole lot of that in New Mexico. And for people who don't know what it is, it's basically a entertainment space where it's a bunch of shipping containers that have been retrofitted into restaurants, and there's a giant place to have concerts and movie nights on a projector, and there's a 21 and over bar, and they make really great cocktails.
Yeah.
And it's a tough room for stand up, but when you can get it going, It's fun.
There you go.
It's a great place. So adding stuff like that has really, I think, boosted Rio Rancho. My question is, let's say I move to Rio Rancho and I want to open, let's say there's already a building base. You don't have to worry about building a building. Let's say there is a building and like a small little business space, and I want to open a comedy club. That's my business venture, is I want to open a comedy club. What do I have to do through the any county paperwork, city paperwork, state, federal? I have to get a liquor license.
Right.
What is the pathway to open that, and then where is there still room for improvement?
So the pathway is actually not very difficult. Is once you find your space, let's say that it's a storefront or something like that, you're going to go in with your architect, design it, and figure out how you want to lay it out. And you're going to submit those plans over to the city for permit, and then the city's going to review the plans and then issue the permit, and you'll start construction on modifying the building in the way that you would want to do it. Now, as far as the state process for the liquor license, that's a whole other thing once you have to submit that paperwork to the state. The city's really not going to have any control over that, other than the city council has to kind of bless the fact that, okay, that particular liquor license is going into this particular building. And other than that, and that's a pretty simple process. It has to go through the governing body, but once that's done, if the building's already existing and it's all zoned and everything, it's pretty much just going in and getting the designs laid out and getting the permits pulled. Now, if you're going to build or you need to rezone, then you've got to kind of go through the planning and zoning process, where you've got to go through the P&Z board, but still a pretty simple process.
Where would you have to do rezoning? Like, how does that come into play?
So let's say you're in a place where it's zoned. Let's just say you're in a neighborhood zoning, let's just say, and you want to turn it commercial, because that's what you're going to be doing. So you might find a residential zoning, and you're going to make an application to change that zoning from residential to commercial. And at that point, the city's going to look at, is this a good fit? Should we be rezoning something in a residential area to commercial? And that gets into different questions, and you want to be very careful about not doing certain things like spot zoning and stuff like that. Or the original zoning might have been commercial, and you might want to turn it to residential. We see a little bit of that happening throughout the city, but for the most part, if you find a nice piece of property and say it doesn't have all the zoning that you need, you just go in and make that. Application, and once again, then it has to go through the planning and zoning board, and then on to the city council. But if the development services department and our planners feel like it's a good fit, and they make a recommendation that says, yeah, I think we should do this, the process becomes pretty simple. Now, if let's say you're right here in my house, and for some reason, my house isn't here tomorrow, and you want to come rezone this for a gas station, you're probably going to have a problem with that, right? So there are certain things when you think about it, because there's neighborhood commercial, like over in Cabazon Park, we've got little dental offices and professional offices, and that's more of a neighborhood commercial. No manufacturing, no high retail traffic. Right. You've got a veterinary clinic in there. You've got an insurance agency in there. You've got a preschool, daycare, and a couple of other businesses in there. So those are neighborhood commercial. For something like what you're talking about, to open a comedy club with liquor, with beer and wine service, liquor service, you're going to be in one of a kind of a populous area, right, where you have access to the traffic and there's parking and so on and so forth, right? You're not going to want to flood all that into a residential area.
Right. That makes perfect sense. I think one of the biggest questions I have about Rio Rancho is, it seems, again, perception, it seems that you guys have managed to not even deal with a homeless problem. You've actively avoided it. Albuquerque, on the other hand, 20 minutes south of here, it's falling apart, effectively. It is falling apart. And I'm not going to beat a dead horse. I've talked about it way too much on this podcast. But like, how have you guys in Rio Rancho, how have you in your office, your team, administration, what have you done to curb any issues and then just actively stay ahead of it, it seems like?
You actively stay ahead of it by curbing it right on the front end, right? But let me also say this, when we do a comparison to Rio Rancho and Albuquerque or any other community, each community has its own challenges. Each community is going to have its own problems. So I want to always be careful, about not doing a direct comparison that we're so much better than this other community. We don't have certain things up here that create some of those problems, like we don't have a bus station. We don't have a train station. We don't have an airport. So you're not going to have some of those transient issues that you're going to see down around, downtown Albuquerque. The other thing is that I've frequently said this, is that we want to be compassionate. We want to be helpful. We want to show people that we care. But at the same point in time, you can't just let people destroy property, and you can't let people take over certain areas. And so we do have active enforcement of our ordinances when it comes in around, encampments. We actively look at that, and we work with the retailers to make sure that if somebody's on private property, that's up to that retailer to trespass that individual if need be. So there's different things, working actively with the community to make sure we do that. And I've constantly said this, is that, while being homeless is not against the law, being homeless should not be a license to break the law either. So that's kind of the way we look at it. When we roll up on somebody that needs something or has a need, our resources, our police department, our EMS people, they're quick to point them to resources. Is that you've got this?
What does resources look like up
Well, resources are a little different. We don't have the robust resources that you have down in Albuquerque, but we've got nonprofit organizations, St. Felix Pantry for people that are need food, Storehouse West. They do food and clothing. Then we've got a lot of faith-based organizations here in the community as well that provide other services and help people out on an individual basis. So it's not this big group type thing where you've got this constant flow of people in and out of a single location, but more of kind of an on-call type situation of what are your needs, how can we help you? We want to help, but you can't be here. You can't do this. We don't want you, because that's not safe for you either.
Yeah, it's not. And because I looked at the last mayoral election obviously it came down between Keller and White.
Correct.
And I think a big thing that lost White the election was how he, not even his ideas behind homelessness, is how he verbalized it.
Right.
But I mean, one thing I think he had right, and I think you're spot on as well, is that you're right, being homeless is not a crime. It's not illegal. However, the after effects that come from that are illegal. And the idea that allowing people to live on the streets, sure, it's not safe for the community and it's not safe for the retailers if they're in front of private business, but it's also not compassionate to those people. Correct. To allow them to actively deteriorate their lives. And you start getting it. I forget who said it, but I think it's a perfect way to put it. With the way that some people view homelessness, it can turn into suicidal empathy.
Yes.
Where not only are you letting these people, because I think it's coming from the right place, where you're letting these people live their life like this, not only is it deteriorating their lives, it's going to start eroding the community. And you're seeing that in Albuquerque. So on the flip side of this, with the enforcement, let's say there are homeless camps that pop up.
Yeah.
What does enforcement look like from either Rio Rancho PD, state PD? What does that look like?
Well, and each community does this a little bit different. For us, if we find an encampment, in a lot of cases, we're required to give that individual notice. We've got to go through a process. It's not just pack it up and go. Mm-hmm. In some cases, we literally have had to post notice on a tunnel that says, hey, this is your notice that we're coming within a certain amount of time to clean this out. So there's different things different approaches that various different communities take. In Albuquerque's standpoint, quite frankly, they're putting a lot of money into the Gateway Center, and they're putting a lot of money into some of these other solutions, but people still aren't going there, right? And we're still not getting people to utilize those services. And I think those services are great as long as you get people in there, you get them transitioned from being homeless to actually being in a home, or getting them into a job, or providing them the behavioral health services that they need, right? Really having a direct impact on their lives to make sure that the dollars that we're spending as taxpayers are actually resulting in positive outcomes.
You have a quantifiable ROI on
Exactly.
something.
Because I believe that everybody wants to solve this problem, and they want to be compassionate about it. And certainly there's a lot of tax dollars that go into solving this problem. But at the same point in time, we're really not kind of leaning in and saying, hey, we've put this here so that you don't have to be here. So it's either here or nowhere else. Right. So we've provided you access to a lot of stuff. Now we need you to take advantage of that stuff, right? And not come over here and create this very unsafe situation.
I agree, and I'll be perfectly honest. I would like to think that people want to solve the issue. People, when I say people, I mean specifically people in government positions.
Yes.
However, when you look at the amount of tax dollars that go into this solving this problem, and you look at the amount of tax dollars that go into salary, and their job is to fix the problem, but if the problem gets fixed and they don't get paid as much, there's not that much need for funding. Obviously, on the extreme side, you have places like San Francisco and LA where these people are getting upwards of $250,000 a year.
Yep.
The salaries here aren't exactly bad, I'll put it that. And so it's like, do they want to solve this problem, or they want to just keep it to where the PR isn't terrible? And that's where I start to look at it like, okay, this is certainly a mayor, both in the Rio Rancho, because you guys are doing it very well, but in Rio Rancho and Albuquerque, it's a mayor's job.
Right.
But I wonder, because I do want to obviously transition into your run for governor, at what point, because it just seems to me and the average citizen that there isn't a direct line of support coming from the state government.
Yeah.
It seems like the cities of New Mexico are kind of just left to do their own thing, and they're left to figure it out, and only in the extremely dire circumstances does anybody from the capital come down to help. Well, help, quote unquote.
Well, and to some degree that is true. I will say that a lot of the communities feel like they are on their own. They're having to come up with their own solutions, reaching out to the state. I know that the state is engaged on certain levels, but once again, when you see kind of the state, for example, deploying the National Guard into Albuquerque, that's one of those things that you're like, okay, you're in a pretty bad place at this point, right? And you're trying to come up with a solution to a problem pretty rapidly. And what you've got to look at from my perspective is how do we not let that problem get in such a bad place that the end result is we've got to pull in the National Guard to fix that. And so you've seen the same thing up in Rio Rancho County. And those are some situations, and this is where the state could really lean in.
And describe where that county is for people who don't know where that's at. Like what cities that take up that county?
So Rio Rancho County is Espanola and on north, right? So very big county up there, but the main population there is Espanola. Right. So this is where the state, I feel, could really lean in and come in and work with communities like Espanola or any other community that wanted to help them build a strategic plan around this issue and really say, okay, this is how we're going to partner with you so long as you stick to the plan, and we've got this idea and we've got this map, this roadmap forward. This is how we're going to get from here to here. As long as you're doing that, the state's going to be right there to partner with you in funding and resources, whether that's bringing in the state police to help until we can get you the appropriate amount of law enforcement officers or EMS personnel hired and get them trained and get them on the ground, and then put them in their place in those communities so that they can really help overcome some of that stuff. When you think about some of the smaller communities, and Rio Rancho was in this same place just in 2014 when I took office, didn't really have the money to add more police officers, didn't have the money to add more firefighters. We had to figure out how to grow our economy without actually going crazy raising taxes, right? I'm very proud of the fact that our sales tax rate is the same today as when I took office 12 years ago. So because we've been able to, just really focus on economic growth and adding partners to the mix that help us grow that economy. Right. Unfortunately, Rio Rancho, while we've experienced about a 20% population growth in the last 10 years, the state of New Mexico is still sitting at around 2.5–3%. So we're not seeing that population growth where we're having people come in and become partners with us and help us kind of share that load. So what does that do? Well, if you have the same amount of people and your costs are going up, then you've got to put those costs on those people. And so their costs are going to go up. And of course, that creates affordability issues all the way across the board. So I chased a little bit of a squirrel there, if you will, on all of this, but it's making those investments in, and this is one of my concepts as we kind of segue into the conversation about running for governor. After being a mayor for 12 years, and to your point, could the state lean in and do a little bit more? Could the state come in and be a better partner? In my opinion, yes. Yeah. And because as a mayor, we've looked to the state to help with certain situations. Granted, certain resources are limited, and they didn't always have the money.
Well, but there's also like a $62 billion pot of money,
correct,
for a rainy day, and I think it's pouring, guys.
It is. I said the same thing. It is pouring. Okay, it's pouring in public safety. It's pouring in infrastructure. It's pouring in economic development. We need investments in those areas. Yeah. Our water infrastructure needs in this state, needs a very specific approach. I just read a recent report that there's expected to be 25 to 50% less water, 30% less water in the state by 2050. And, one of the big things is there's calling to manage those resources. But you're exactly right. It's pouring because we have not made the investments in the areas that I think we need to make those investments. And, and to this point, whether it's running a city or running a state, everything's a priority. So everything's a priority, whether it's public safety, infrastructure, water, education, healthcare, everything's a priority. So how do you solve all those problems? And sometimes it's allocating money. In my opinion, we need severe work in the capital outlay process in this state because you've got too much money that's sprinkled around there. You've got, I don't know, somewhere between last number I heard, it was anywhere between $4 and $7 billion that's just sitting there in unspent capital outlay, because for various different reasons. But that could be deployed and be put to work for us right now, and that's just in the capital outlay process.
I'm going to think about that every time I'm stuck in traffic because of construction.
Well, when you're in construction, that's your capital outlay at work.
Right, yeah. That is a funny thing to complain about. I hate construction, but we need it.
Right. Well, that's the big thing that I've had up here is, the number one thing that people wanted fixed in Rio Rancho was roads. Mm-hmm. And I
fixing the roads, and people are like, why is there construction?
Yes. What are all these orange barrels? I talk about it on my podcast all the time when we talk about road construction. I have a weekly radio show, and I'll do a shameless plug here. It's the Mayor Hull Show, and we talk about
plug it, yeah.
It's the Mayor Hull Show. It's on Spotify, but we talk about all the things that are happening here in Rio Rancho, and road construction's the big one. Is what roads are we fixing? Where are we fixing them? How are we fixing them? How long is it going to take? And yes, it's frustrating, and I remind people that a lot of the people that moved here, this is the first time the roads have ever been actually ripped up and redone, right? In Rio Rancho, because we're only 44 years old. Yeah. And we're at a place where we're having to tear these things up and put new infrastructure underneath them and modernize all that. And it takes a little bit of work. It takes a little bit of time, and it takes a lot of resources to get that work done. But I always tell people, look, when the orange barrels are gone, you're going to be really happy, because no thump, 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 thump. And and by the way, I love it. We get the comments of, when are you going to fix the road? There's the thump, 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 thump. And then we fix the road, and we're like, okay, now everybody's speeding on the road.
I will say this one thing.
Can you put speed bumps? No, I just took the bumps out.
One thing I do not like about Rio Rancho is I can't speed up here because I know I'll get a ticket. I know for a fact. So good for you. Good job.
Yeah.
But, So what?
But that's part of that broken window syndrome of not letting things get out of control, right? Yeah. We have a strong ground game on whether it's speeding, traffic control, just monitoring some of that basic stuff that happens up here. And then people come up here with that understanding. We're known for that. If you come into Rio Rancho and you're weaving or you're speeding or you're tailgating, you're apt to get pulled over.
Right.
And we've got just a wonderful police force. I had a guy call me it was a few weeks ago, and he says, Mayor, I just want to compliment you. And I said, what? He says, I got pulled over and I got a ticket. But after that officer gave me that ticket, I felt like he was giving me I felt like I had just received a reward. Like he was so polite.
I think he's got that guy got pulled over as mental illness. But anyway, so what I'm curious about is, so you, like you said a little bit earlier, you had no real idea of getting into politics. I've heard you say that before in other interviews. You end up getting into office. You're now well into your third term, and now you're wanting to turn around and get a promotion and become governor.
Yes.
Why do you want to be the governor?
Well, I've after being the mayor of the city for the second or third largest city in the state. Once again, we can debate that one back and forth right now. I just feel that there is an opportunity to step up and really do some of the things that we've done in Rio Rancho, help other communities across the state achieve these same goals. And when you think about it, right now, New Mexico takes a very one-size-fits-all approach to the entire state. Yeah. But all of our communities, Noah, are so vastly different in culture and in character. When you think about the difference, and I like to point this one out, the difference between Los Alamos and Espanola, those are two communities that are relatively close to each other, but vastly different. And you just think about that and the different needs of those communities. As a mayor, even in the legislature today, I'm the president of the New Mexico Municipal League. You see them bringing bills that are taking authorities away from cities and trying to just do this one-size-fits-all approach to how the state is governing. You're trying to make every community in the state conform to a specific template because one community did something that got somebody upset.
I do want to interject on that. What happened in Santa Fe with SB 71?
Okay, remind me what SB.
So it's the bill that's getting passed. I've been trying to look into it, but I can't find hard information on it. But it's basically a gun restriction bill that is going.
Yes,
I believe that it's reducing the magazine size that you can have, and then it's reducing. There's another one. I'll find it and I'll put it in the description.
So SB 71, it just passed its first Senate committee hearing along partisan lines. And what it seeks to do is put additional regulations on gun dealers in the state.
That's what it was.
So it puts additional regulations on gun dealers. And for individuals like myself, we don't see the gun dealers as being the problem. They're not going out and illegally transacting gun sales behind the counter. So putting these additional requirements on those dealers doesn't solve the core problem of you've got a whole illegal gun trade, and if you want to get illegal guns off the streets, you've got to go get them away from the criminals, and you've got to protect the rights of innocent citizens. And so when you look at enabling gun legislation to try to stem the gun crimes, the one thing you've got to do is go after the illegal guns, because I can tell you, any licensed gun dealer that's got an FFL, they're being audited, they're being checked, they're being monitored very closely from the federal government. So putting additional restrictions on them doesn't make any sense. If they're transacting legally and they're following all the rules, making new rules isn't going to slow that down. And look, let's just say I wanted to go and purchase a firearm tomorrow. I don't have any felonies. I'm not I don't have a criminal record. I should be able to walk in there and exercise, my freedoms and my rights, not based on the criminal actions of somebody else. Right. And so, but these restrictions are coming in. And once again, this goes back to this one size fits all, is sometimes when somebody in one city does one thing, the legislature wants to change everything to make sure that doesn't happen in every other community. So they'll pass this one size fits all. And let's say something goes wrong in Albuquerque. That doesn't mean it's wrong in Rio Rancho. And that doesn't mean it's wrong in Farmington. And it doesn't mean it's wrong in Clovis or Las Cruces or Hobbs. is that you need to look at these problems on an individual basis and go in and work with those communities to solve those problems on a local level. Because if you want to bring crime down in the state, if you want to bring your crime numbers down in the state, you start where the crime is. That's in the communities, right? Start there. Help bring those numbers down in those communities, and you're going to see those numbers come down statewide. Yeah. Same thing with education. You want to see your scores go up? Start in the community, start in the school districts, start working with those school districts on a one-on-one basis. Help those school districts develop, and I'm big on this, strategic plans, okay? And then once you have that strategic plan in place, you follow it. I was shocked that just last year, I think APS, largest school district in the state, first time ever last year they developed a strategic plan.
I mean, is that surprising for 50-person education in the whole nation?
It was the first thing I did when I took office, we've got to have a plan on what we're going to do and a guiding document. And we really focused on 5 core areas of public safety and infrastructure and quality of life. Those just really key things that we said we want to focus on these things. And if the things we're doing don't fall into these buckets, then we're not going to do them right now. They're not a priority. But what goes in these buckets, those are the priorities. And so you sort those things out. And I think there's a lot of communities in New Mexico that, whether it's, it might not be Albuquerque, but there's a lot of smaller communities throughout the state that say, yeah, we need that assistance from the state. We need that help. But once again, going back to your question on SB 71, is that, yes, that passed its Senate hearing committee, and now it's going to move on for a vote in other committees. So we'll see where that goes. But the arguments against that right now is that punishes the wrong people. It goes after the wrong individuals. We need to get criminals off the street. We need to get the guns away from the criminals, because the law-abiding citizens that are legal gun owners are not the ones out there. I mean, in Albuquerque, like the kids that were walking down the street in the middle of the night and killed the lady in her driveway. Right? I mean, that was a few years back, but that was just absolutely tragic.
Well, even just because for my day job, I work for a security company. I manage different sites and stuff. And next to one of the sites that I'm not going to out where I work for, but one of the sites that I manage, this was 2 Tuesdays ago. It was a 17-year-old guy and a 19-year-old girl that shot each other. Guy died, girl went to the hospital. So that stuff's happening all over the state. A concern that I have in general for elections in general right now. You're running as a Republican.
Yes.
In it's funny, like New Mexico's a blue state voting wise, but if you look at the actual counties, we're an overly red state, but where the population density is, it's blue.
Correct.
Where I'm concerned, and you saw this it's with voting demographics. You saw this when the last governor election happened, where Ronchetti really suffered, was because I think only in his election, only 38% of registered Republicans voted.
Right.
And then you look at the last mayoral election in Albuquerque, only 33% of Republicans voted. So you have a voting block there. More so than a voting block issue, but more so than that, right now, the Republican Party is hemorrhaging support on an hourly basis.
Right.
And I mean, on the federal level, I think they deserve all of the beatings that they're getting right now.
Sure.
Because they are, in my opinion, they took the massive potential of November of 2024 and they just wasted 99% of it. Now that you're running on the state level, but because you're going to have the R next to your name and you're going to be in a democratically voting state, you can already see the playbook from the other side of the aisle, where you can have all the great plans in the world, but they're going to point at you and say, Republican, Donald Trump, bad. That's all that was their strategy in the last governor election. That was Keller's strategy in this recent election. What is the plan to not only get your own voter base, the Republicans, to vote, but to show New Mexicans that with a strategic plan from someone who has a positive history in doing these kind of things, that you are the right person for the job, as opposed to just voting on party lines? Correct.
And that's, and I'll be real frank with you, my last election up here in Rio Rancho, I won with nearly 70% of the vote. And you don't do that unless you have about 30% Democrats, and you have a lot of your independents.
Right.
And really, when you look at the voting base up here in Rio Rancho, you're going to have 30% that are going to vote Republican no matter what, and that's your voting base, right? And then you're going to have 30% that are going to vote Democrat no matter what, and then that's just a decision that they've made. And then in here, you've got about 40% in the center that you've got to figure out how to shift that into your category. And in the last election, I won pretty much 100% of that. Yeah. And so we pulled all that in, got up 68.5%, I think is what the total was there. And what you got to do, where I'm going to have a different approach, where I'm going to have a very different approach, is I've got this resume that says Rio Rancho and what we've done in public safety, what we've done in quality of life, what we've done in infrastructure, what we've done in economic development and growth. We've got, well, I don't have any direct oversight over it. We've got one of the best education systems in the state right here in Rio Rancho as well. So you've got all of these different things here that create a really wonderful model around opportunity. You've got a lot of things that create a lot of opportunity around safety and infrastructure. And these are the things that when the day-to-day elections are over and all of the national debate issues or statewide debate issues kind of fall into the dust, people go back to their normal lives. And what do people really want at the end of the day? They want to feel safe in their communities. They want to feel like their government is actually acting in their best interest. And in these particular cases, that has been my focus in Rio Rancho, is getting up every day and saying, how can I improve the lives of people? Not Republicans and Democrats necessarily, but how can I improve the lives of people? Is that through fixing roads? Is that through adding more police officers? Is that making sure that adding a real-time crime center? And in my particular case, we added a new senior center. We have added a new library. Different things like that you're listening and you're saying, these are the things that the people want to see added. And so let's work on getting those things in place. So I may get elected governor. I may not. And I'm okay with that because I've had a lot of fun being the mayor of Rio Rancho for the last 12 years. And we've done a lot of amazing things. And I love New Mexico, and I love this state. I moved here when I was right after I graduated high school. I moved to Santa Fe, and then in Albuquerque, and landed in Rio Rancho. And before that, my dad was in the hotel business, so we moved all over the United States. So this was the first place I really called home and stayed, and didn't just live here for a year or two and then moved on. This is where I raised my family. I've got my kids live here, my grandkids live here. And now I want to create a New Mexico that my great grandkids will be in, and so on and so forth, because New Mexico is just an amazing state. And so, do we have all of the answers? Are we guaranteed to win? There's always going to be those outside external factors that are going to play a role in people's decision making. But that's where I talk to people and I say, hey, look, just, if you'll sit down and talk with me, or if you'll just listen to some of the ideas that we have, I think you'll be pleased. And I think you'll like my style of management, because my style of management is, I like data-driven decisions. I like data-driven results. I like seeing people's lives improve and seeing actual markable progress. And so I think that's the message that I'm going to bring, and I think that's going to resonate, because I think a lot of people, whether you're on the left or the right, or however you want to size that up, right now, what we're hearing around the state, whether it's from Republicans or Democrats, is they want to see more opportunity in the state. They want to see some of the if you're a business and you want to move to New Mexico, it's hard to come into a state, bring a business into a state where you've got high crime issues, you've got serious educational problems. You probably don't want to move your kids here if you're moving from another state, and then you've got the healthcare issues, which I'm hoping we're going to see some change in that in this particular legislation, but this legislative session, I should say. But that being said, there's so many things that when a company wants to come in, that they're going to say, I'm not sure I really want to be here. At Rio Rancho, we've tried to make ourselves very business friendly, in the sense that if you want to invest here, we want to make that path to investment as seamless as possible.
We want your business.
We want your business, exactly. Yeah. And that comes from me being a past small business guy, right? And I remember when I was in Rio Rancho, I was helping some friends of mine get business licenses, and it was a horrible process just to get a home occupation business license. And we've got that streamlined now. If you if you're going to run something from your home that's legally allowed to be run from your home, you should be able to get that done in a couple of days now, as opposed to it used to be a couple of weeks, if not a month, right? Yeah. And so we've seen between $6 and $7 billion in economic investment in Rio Rancho just in the last 12 years, and that has really got the engines running, and that's why we've been able to grow our economy and not stack the economy by just raising tax after tax after tax.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. Smaller government tends to make things a lot smoother. And I've never managed a campaign. I've never run for office. But I think that is one of, if not your best angle, is that we have Rio Rancho. Rio Rancho right now is the shining gem of New Mexico.
Well, thank you.
It is. No, it just is. And I think leaning on that is one of your best bets. And obviously one of the topics certainly right now, and I know that the election is about 10 months away, but as far as politics go, that's next week. It's going to come like that.
Yeah, it's going to be fast.
So one thing that I don't think is going away anytime soon is the issue of immigration.
Yep.
We are a border state. You see a lot of states right now, they're almost picking sides. They're either going to say, you know what, let the federal government do what they need to do. And then you're going to have other states that are flat out saying, if you bring ICE into here, we're going to arrest them or whatever.
Right.
So just in general, what is your approach to, because at the end of the day, and a year ago I was saying, I think most people agree that if you're here illegally, and you're found out to be here illegally, you're breaking the law of the country,
sure,
you should be deported.
Sure.
I thought that was common sense. Turns out it's not. But
right.
So just looking at immigration as a whole, how, when you become, I think you have a genuine shot at being governor. Let's say that happens, you become governor. What is your approach to working in conjunction with the Trump administration? What is your approach to just immigration in general?
Well, so if elected governor, by the time I'm there, obviously President Trump will have 2 more years in office. So we're gonna have more than one administration that we're gonna have to work with. Mm-hmm. And so when it comes to law enforcement, when it comes to enforcing our nation's laws, I'm big on law enforcement. I'm big on enforcing. If we've got laws on the books, we enforce them, and if we don't want to enforce those laws, we should be taking them off the books. And so when we look at this, we want to be work with law enforcement to make sure that laws are being enforced. We want to do that in the right way. Absolutely, we want to do that in a very careful, methodical way to make sure that we're protecting people's rights and we're doing these different things like that, right? But at the same point in time, there is a process of law enforcement that has to take place. And you've seen this throughout the ages. When certain things happen throughout the country, there's disagreements with law enforcement, whether we should be enforcing laws, whether we shouldn't be enforcing laws. It hasn't been just solely over immigration. In the past, we've seen it through so many other different laws where somebody said, hey, look, I don't really want to be, I think we shouldn't have to do this, or we should go another route. I've seen it cycle through over and over again. And right now, this is where we're at in this stage in the United States. So I'm always gonna take the pro law enforcement stance, because I believe if you want to feel safe in your community, if you want to feel safe in your state, if you want to feel safe in your country, we've got to have positive, strong enforcement of the laws. But at the same point in time, we want to make sure that as those laws are being enforced, that everybody from law enforcement to citizens are accountable for their actions in making sure that people feel safe one way or the other. Yep. And so that's going to be my approach, is that states have to work with federal governments, and what capacity that comes in depends on the relationship that you build with that federal government and whoever is in that office. I've been the mayor for a Trump administration, a Biden administration, and now back to a Trump administration. So we've seen lots of changes go back and forth, but at the end of the day, what the most important decision you have to make is making decisions for New Mexicans. And so we and that's where I'm at. I want to make decisions that support New Mexico, support its culture, support what it is. New Mexico as a state, we are a very unique state, and it is the quintessential part of its beauty and its charm and what attracts people here when they say land of enchantment. I mean, it is enchanting. You get here in the mountains and the valleys and the plains and all the different, I mean, from one corner of the state to the next, you can just experience something so very different. And one of the things that I'm doing a lot of right now is driving around the state. And I'm seeing things driving around the state that I didn't really pay attention to the first time I drove down that road. And I'm going, oh, I never saw that before. Or I was up in Silver City where you've got the lady at the cathedral, the rock formation up there. I'd never seen that before, and I'd seen it, but I didn't know what it was until somebody said that's what that formation is. I said, well, that's really cool. So you're just seeing all these amazing different things as you go around the state, and we are a very unique state. So when it comes to New Mexico, as the governor, I'm going to make decisions that are strong and supportive of New Mexico because that's what I'm running for governor of. And so we want to make sure that we're, that our people feel safe, that our kids are getting a great education, that we have excellent health care available, and that we start working on infrastructure. And quite frankly, the one big piece of infrastructure that really we have to start really looking at, and we've done this in Rio Rancho, is investment in our water infrastructure throughout the state, because that's going to be the next big thing that we have to address. Is if we're going to grow, if we're going to continue to increase in population, if we're going to grow in population, and we're going to bring opportunity to the state, water is one of those resources that you're going to need to manage very well. And then, of course, energy is another huge one that we're going to have to be focused on, because making sure that we can meet the energy needs of these companies that want to come here. For example, you've got Project Jupiter coming in down in Las Cruces.
Right.
They're going to draw a lot of power. That's why they're going to have to onboard their own power plant, and because the grid down there is not going to sustain that particular facility. We had the opportunity to get a data center up here in Rio Rancho. They looked up here, not the same one, but a different one, and there was not enough power on the grid to run it. So building out that infrastructure is going to take a lot of time. And so they decided, well, we're just going to go somewhere where where we can find the power and it's readily available so that we can do what we need to do. So we don't want to miss out on opportunities like that.
Right. You talk about the water issues too. I mean, one of the big things that people are criticizing these data centers for is the amount, not just the amount of power that they take up when you build them, but it's what they're doing to the natural resources surrounding them. As the governor, how do you have those conversations with the companies that want to come in? Because we have the massive data center down in Berlin for Meta.
Yep.
And then we have, it's not a data center, but we have the giant Intel center here.
Yep.
And then as more of these, whether they're AI data centers or not, right, when you have these massive, let's just say, energy drawing facilities.
Right.
And they're going to, again, affect energy, and they're affecting natural resources, specifically water. How do you have these conversations with these company owners where it's like, we would like to have you here, but we need to have a civil conversation about what does it realistically look like when we put pen to paper, or, you put the drill to the ground?
Right. So you've got to look at their plan and what they're going to do with natural resources. And I think Intel does a really great job when you look at their resource plan and how they reinvest back into natural resources, like some of their water restoration plans and working on water projects throughout the state to offset the usages that they use there at that particular plant. And then, of course, one of the things that they do is they send that water back down, and it gets recycled and gets cleaned and then put back in the river so that it can go downstream and have beneficial use downstream. There's a lot of different ways that you can work with these companies to make sure that they are being a good steward of the resource, using it and then returning it. That's one thing that Rio Rancho does, is we use groundwater and we clean it, and we're the first city in the state with the aquifer recharge system, where we get it cleaned, we put it back and we bank it back into the aquifer for future use. So this is not a new system. States like California, Arizona, Texas, Utah have all done these systems. We're just kind of behind the eight ball when it comes to, doing things that other states have already, invested in. The technology's been proven, and as we move forward, looking at how we can invest in those systems, not just from the companies that are using the water, but the cities that are using the water as well. Because as Rio Rancho has grown, obviously added, when you're talking about adding 20,000 people population, that's a lot of homes. So we've added a ton of homes. All those homes need water. right? And so it's not just the use on the manufacturing side or on the cooling side. Now, I think there's some really creative ways that we can work with those data centers in some resources that we have throughout the state, that the research is coming along. But one of those things is like in the oil and gas industry, using the produced water to cool those facilities as to using fresh water as opposed to using potable. But many of these facilities now are coming in with recycling facilities where they're reusing the water over and over again, and then when they do reuse it, they put it back into the river so that it goes downstream and it gets restored. Because that's one of the things that Rio Rancho does is after what we don't inject, we do put it back in the river and it goes back downstream for beneficial use. Albuquerque does the same thing with some of their reuse water, and then they brought an injection well online at this point in time as well. So they're doing some things, and we're starting to set the model that really helps us preserve that natural resource. And a lot of the industries that you have these days can really take that water and once again, recycle it, reuse it. We have a facility just not too far from here, less than a mile from here, that cleans our reuse water to near potable quality, and that could be easily used for manufacturing purposes as opposed to letting them pump from groundwater. Now, Intel does pump their own groundwater in this particular case, but they do a good job of making sure that they're being a good steward of that resource and restoring it to a basically what they call a net zero, a net positive return on the water that they use to make sure that they're having a positive impact on that resource.
Okay, that makes sense. And I want to be respectful of your time. I do have one last quick question. Get into the governor's office, building a team to execute all of your plans. How do you look for the right people for the positions?
So you look for the right people, for the people that are qualified. And that's what we've done here in Rio Rancho. Is we've got a great leadership team here in Rio Rancho that helps pull all this stuff off. Because when you run for elected office, you've got a lot of great ideas, you've got your experiences, but you're not an expert in every area, right? So you've got to find those people that are experts in those areas. You need to look for those experts in education that are going to help you really fundamentally restructure some of the things that are happening in New Mexico, so that we can so that we can support our teachers, support the school districts, support the organizations, but at the same point in time, giving them the resources they need to actually come away with the results that we're looking for. And the results is giving our kids the best education we can possibly give them. Right? That's what we want. Investing in our kids is investing in our future. And so, but when you want to go into law enforcement, you want some of the top individuals when it comes to helping you determine how you're going to approach law enforcement in the state. When you talk about infrastructure, it's the same as here in the city when we deal with like our utility. We have a great utilities director here in the city. Our streets and right-of-way director that understands, he's a great engineer, understands how to get this work done and how to do it most effectively and how to make sure we're getting the work done so that the people see the results. Same thing with our Parks and Rec director, our Senior Citizens director, for our Senior Services divisions. All of these individuals are professionals in their field. So putting that team together, we're going to look for the individuals that really have those key credentials in those areas, so that way we're not just kind of filling those slots with political favors, right?
Yeah.
So that's a big thing for me.
That's never happened in Santa Fe.
Oh yeah,
ever.
It's not looking so much for that, but actually looking for individuals that are skilled in these areas and that can actually produce those results for the citizens of New Mexico, because it's the citizens of New Mexico that are paying those salaries. And those citizens deserve results for the money that they're paying, because quite frankly, if you go and you buy a service somewhere and you don't get what you want, normally you go back and say, hey, I want a refund, right? But in government, it doesn't quite work that way. So we want to make sure that we are getting the top results for what people are paying for. And I think the citizens of New Mexico deserve that.
I completely agree. Thank you again for letting me into your home and doing this.
Yeah.
Thank you for your time. I know you're a super busy guy. Just real quick before we get done, where can people support you, not only just as the mayor of Rio Rancho, but your current campaign for governor? Website, social media, where can people find you and support you?
Absolutely. So our Facebook page is Hull for New Mexico. You can find us there. Follow us on Facebook. Our website is gregghull.com, and stay tuned to that particular website, because over the next few weeks we're going to be loading up a lot of our policy papers around education, around public safety, around infrastructure, all these different types of topics that we know that are really critical and key to individuals here in the state of New Mexico. So we'll be loading our policy papers up and our policy positions on a lot of these different areas, so that people can see where we are and what our intention is when it comes to achieving some of these goals. And so keep an eye out for that. GreggHull.com, and that's GreggHull.com. So 2 G's on the end of Gregg. And you can also follow us on Instagram. I think it's Hull4NM on Instagram is the moniker there. And I think we're on X and all the other stuff. So
cool.
So we try to post stuff out there so people see what we're doing and can follow along. And
great.
We've received extremely positive comments, positive results, positive support, and we're excited about the trek forward. You know, it's going to be a long 10 months to November at this point, but but we'll get there. You know, we'll get there, and once we get there, and if we win the governor's office and we really just start working hard for New Mexico the same way I've worked hard for Rio Rancho.
Great. Well, thank you.
And by the way, let me say, I love my town of Rio Rancho. I'm not getting rid of my house here. I love my city. I just want to go to the state and help the communities of the state do the best that they can possibly do.
Well, you're the kind of guy that we need as a governor. New Mexico's on the wrong track, in my opinion, and we need some common sense, and we need people in there that are actually going to do a job and not just collect a paycheck. So thank you again for doing this.
Yep.
And everything that you just described, that is going to be in the description of this episode. Thank you, everyone, for listening and watching, and we'll see you next time. Bye, everybody.
Thank you.